My mom pushed me out of my own office. The next morning, they begged me back. Daniel Carter had always been ambitious. From the first day he walked into his mother's small logistics company, he had seen its potential. The company, run by Linda Carter for over 20 years, had once been respectable, with dozens of clients and a steady workforce. But as technology advanced, competitors grew faster, and the company began to fall behind. Contracts were lost, shipments delayed, and debts quietly piled up in corners of the office that no one dared to mention. Daniel had started working there at the age of 24. At first it was just an internship, a way to understand the family business, but soon it became clear that he had something no one else did: vision. He saw the old methods weren't enough. Manual spreadsheets, paper logs, and outdated phones couldn't compete with modern tracking systems. He proposed changes: digital systems, online client management, and smarter scheduling. At first, Linda had been skeptical. After all, she had built the company from the ground up herself. But Daniel was persistent, patient, and convincing. Slowly, the results began to show. Within 5 years, Daniel had transformed the company. Profits grew steadily, new clients were signed, and employee morale improved. He became a quiet hero within the company, even if he didn't always get the credit he deserved. Everyone trusted him: the drivers, the office staff, the logistics managers. But one person never seemed to notice. His mother. Linda had always seen Daniel as her little boy. A bright, clever boy, yes, but still just her son. She enjoyed giving advice, offering corrections, and taking credit for his ideas in front of board members and clients. Daniel had tolerated it for years because family came first, but lately her interference had started to hurt the company. On a bright Monday morning, Daniel prepared for a board meeting he had been anticipating for weeks. The expansion plan was ready. He had analyzed routes, staffing, fuel costs, and client projections. Everything was perfect. This plan could take the company national. He was nervous, yes, but excited. He had worked hard for this. When the meeting began, the board members were polite, sipping their coffee and nodding at Daniel as he presented. He explained the projections step by step, showing graphs, charts, and schedules. Every number had been double-checked. Every risk had a backup plan. By the end, the room felt charged with possibility. Then, Linda spoke. She stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. "Daniel," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I appreciate your efforts, but this is too much for you. You're too emotional, too inexperienced. From today, I am taking full control of all decisions." Daniel froze. He had expected skepticism, questions, maybe even negotiation. But this? Being publicly dismissed in front of everyone, he could feel the heat in his face. He glanced at the board members. Some avoided eye contact, unsure of how to respond. Others looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. His cousin Mark, who had joined the company recently, smirked from across the table. Daniel had seen him whispering to Linda in recent weeks, but he never imagined this betrayal. "Excuse me?" Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. I have led operations for years. This expansion plan is not just numbers. It's what I built with my team. You can't just—" "You don't understand!" Linda interrupted, raising a hand. "I am the owner. I make the decisions. And right now, I say this project is too risky for you." A tense silence followed. Daniel felt the room closing in. He looked at his team, employees he had hired personally, trained personally. Some avoided looking at him. A few tried to hide smiles. Security arrived quietly. They didn't speak, just waited for Daniel to stand. He did. Slowly, deliberately. He gathered his briefcase, his laptop, and the folder with the expansion plan. Every step felt surreal. The room seemed to blur. This was his office, his team, his company. And yet he was being escorted out as if he were a stranger. The hallway felt colder than usual. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. He passed the conference room, seeing some employees whispering. Some looked guilty. Others looked relieved. Mark followed closely behind. "It's better this way," he said casually, as if the company wasn't at stake. Daniel didn't reply. He didn't need to. Words wouldn't fix this. He had been humiliated in front of the people he trusted, the people he had worked for. The betrayal was sharp. It was personal. Outside the building, Daniel paused. The morning sun felt too bright. He looked back at the glass doors. He could see Linda through them, sitting in his chair, a smug smile on her face. For a moment, something inside him flickered. Anger, yes, but also something calmer. Determination. "They think I need this company," he whispered to himself. "They forgot. The company needs me." Daniel walked to his car without a word. Inside, he sat quietly, letting the event sink in. He wasn't angry for long. He was thinking, planning. Every betrayal leaves a mark he knew, and every mark can be turned into fuel. That night, he went home. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just sat in his room, opening his laptop. Emails, spreadsheets, and contracts scrolled across the screen. He began to outline a new strategy, one that didn't rely on anyone who had betrayed him. Meanwhile, at the office, Linda and Mark celebrated. They had full control. At least, they thought they did. Mark leaned back in the big leather chair. "Finally," he said. "Ah, the company is ours." Linda nodded, feeling victorious. "Daniel will come crawling back eventually. He always does." But they didn't know the quiet power Daniel had built. Loyalty. Not money, not titles. Loyalty. The drivers who respected him, the managers who trusted him, the clients who depended on him, they were invisible, silent, but potent. And Daniel had already been nurturing them, quietly, for weeks, laying the groundwork for what would come next. The next morning, Daniel didn't go to the office. He went elsewhere, somewhere he could think, plan, and act without interference. By lunch, he had already drafted emails, signed agreements, and arranged meetings. By the afternoon, he had connected with several key employees, people who respected him, trusted him, and knew his competence. By evening, they had all agreed to help him in his new venture. Daniel didn't need revenge today. He didn't need confrontation today, but he needed recognition, respect, and he would make sure of it. Slowly, deliberately, he was building the foundation. One email, one conversation, one loyal employee at a time. Back at the office, chaos quietly began to brew. Linda and Mark didn't notice it yet. They were too busy celebrating their supposed victory, but cracks were forming in the walls of their new empire. Clients were confused. Employees were hesitant. The systems Daniel had set up, the ones Linda had ignored, started to fail under inexperienced hands. The expansion plan that Daniel had drafted, now discarded, was still being remembered by the people who had worked for him and knew its value. And Daniel? He was calm, apparently more connected to the software. He said to him, "Apparently, everyone in the room is perfectly better." Confident. He had been pushed out, yes. Humiliated, yes. But he had not been defeated. Let them enjoy their victory, he thought. Tomorrow they will realize it was never theirs to take. That night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment looking over the city lights. His mother's betrayal stung, yes, but it was also a lesson. People who take power for granted rarely hold it. Those who earn it protect it. And Daniel had learned both lessons that day. As he closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, a small, almost imperceptible smile appeared on his face. Not a smile of happiness. Not yet. But a smile of certainty. The next morning would begin a new chapter. One where Daniel would rise stronger, smarter, and more unstoppable than anyone, not even his mother, could anticipate. For now, he rested. The storm was coming. And it would be his. The morning after his mother had publicly humiliated him, Daniel woke early, as if he had slept for 100 restless nights. The sun had barely risen, painting the city in soft golden light. Most people would have spent the morning stewing in anger or despair. Daniel, however, had already begun planning. He brewed a cup of coffee and sat at his small apartment desk, laptop open, documents spread across it like pieces of a chessboard. Each file represented a small piece of his life's work, each client, each employee, each carefully built system. Everything that had been taken from him in a single humiliating moment could be reclaimed. But Daniel knew he needed patience, strategy, and silence. He began by contacting the employees he trusted most. Not loudly, not publicly, and not in a way that would alert his mother or cousin Mark. A simple, discreet email to the key managers. Meeting today, 2 p.m., cafe on 5th Street. Spending it. Important, no explanation. No emotion, just an invitation. By early afternoon, the loyal few gathered in the quiet corner of the cafe. There were smiles of recognition, nods of understanding, and subtle gestures of loyalty. Daniel explained nothing at first. He only listened, asked questions, and reminded them of what they had accomplished together. "Remember the system we set up last year?" he asked. "The one that cut delivery errors by 40%. It's still the best system out there. And we can use it again." Heads nodded. These were people who had seen him work, who knew the company inside and out. They understood him better than anyone else. And slowly, Daniel began to lay the groundwork for his plan. The first step was reclaiming his influence silently. He didn't call out his mother publicly. He didn't threaten Mark. Instead, he worked behind the scenes to remind the company's people what mattered: efficiency, reliability, and trust. Within hours, employees who had remained uncertain began to respond. Drivers called in early, offering to take extra routes. Managers volunteered to check schedules and systems without prompting. Meanwhile, at the office, Linda and Mark were beginning to feel a false sense of security. Mark had started sitting in Daniel's former office chair, pretending to understand the operations. Linda had already begun making public announcements that she was in full control, that the company was now hers to lead. She was proud of herself, confident that Daniel would have no recourse. But small cracks had begun to appear. Deliveries were delayed. Drivers refused to take new routes without clear instructions. Systems that Daniel had set up were misunderstood or ignored. Clients started calling in with complaints, which confused Linda and Mark. Mark slammed his hand on the desk, frustrated. "Why are the drivers refusing work? They've always listened." Linda frowned, tapping her fingers nervously. Maybe Daniel trained them too well. Or maybe they're just slow to adjust. They didn't notice the emails quietly being sent from Daniel's laptop, forwarding offers of jobs, collaborations, and contracts to the trusted staff who had gathered at the cafe. By the end of the day, half of Daniel's team had agreed to join his new venture. Daniel wasn't just rebuilding a team. He was building trust and loyalty. Unlike Linda, who ruled by authority and fear, Daniel led by respect. Every employee who agreed to follow him did so not for money, not for titles, but because they believed in him, in his competence, and in the way he had always treated them. By evening, Daniel began contacting clients, again, quietly. Small emails, personal messages, and calls. He reminded them of his track record, of the systems that worked, and of the personal attention he always gave. Within hours, several clients expressed interest in continuing business under his leadership, no matter the company name. Back at the office, Linda was growing anxious. Mark had tried to fix operational problems, but the systems were failing. Shipments were late. Complaints poured in. For the first time, Linda realized that Daniel was the backbone of the company, the silent engine that had kept it running efficiently for years. Her confidence faltered. She picked up her phone and tried to call him. Daniel didn't answer. She left a message, polite but desperate. "Daniel, please come back. We need you." Daniel read it, smiled faintly, and deleted it. There was no rush. She would beg in her own time. That night, Daniel returned to his small apartment and sat alone. He didn't celebrate it. He didn't gloat. Instead, he reflected it. Every action taken today had been a test, every reaction measured, and every success strengthened his resolve. He opened a new document titled simply, "Future Company Strategy." Here he outlined plans for a new business, using the same knowledge, skills, and systems that had made the old company successful. He drafted operational charts, delivery schedules, client acquisition plans, and employee contracts. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be ready. Daniel's plan was not about destruction. He didn't want to ruin his mother or cousin. He wanted independence, respect, and recognition for his work, but he knew that standing silently in the shadows could give him a greater advantage than confrontation ever could. Meanwhile, small tremors of Daniel's influence began to ripple through the old company. Employees who had stayed loyal whispered among themselves. Drivers began following Daniel's old schedules instead of Mark's improvisations. Managers began correcting mistakes quietly, using Daniel's systems. By the third day, Linda and Mark were fully aware of the problem. Panic began to set in. Clients called, employees questioned orders, and deliveries were delayed. The company that had once seemed secure under Linda's leadership was now teetering. Mark stormed into Linda's office. "We can't do this!" "Everything is falling apart. Daniel, he's controlling everything from somewhere else." Linda's face turned pale. "How?" "He's out. He has no authority." Mark shook his head. "He doesn't need authority. People follow him because they trust him. And clients, they're already talking to him. Some are even asking to transfer business." Linda slumped into her chair. The reality hit her hard. Daniel's absence was more powerful than his presence had ever been. Meanwhile, Daniel's new venture was growing quietly. The team at the cafe met daily to organize operations, draft client proposals, and build the infrastructure. Daniel delegated tasks efficiently, and employees felt valued and respected. He didn't give orders. He guided, taught, and encouraged. Loyalty and trust built faster than any board meeting ever could. Daniel also took time to observe his mother and cousin from a distance. He didn't interfere directly. He didn't need to. Every mistake they made, every delay in judgment, was a lesson for them. He could watch silently, letting them believe they were winning, while he quietly amassed power and influence elsewhere. By the end of the week, it was clear to everyone in the industry that Daniel's presence, or absence, mattered more than anyone had realized. Clients who had previously worked with Linda began contacting Daniel's new team. Drivers and managers who had remained neutral now chose sides. Even suppliers started asking discreet questions. "Where is Daniel now? We want to work with him." Inside the old office, panic turned to desperation. Linda tried to assert control, but every attempt failed. Mark's impatience caused mistakes, and employees grew more disillusioned. The company that had once thrived under Daniel's quiet leadership now teetered on collapse. Daniel, however, remained calm. Each step he took was deliberate, measured, and quiet. He didn't boast, he didn't rush, he didn't gloat. He built influence like a river carving a canyon, slowly, inevitably, leaving a permanent mark. At night, he sat alone, reflecting on the week. He remembered his mother's words, the humiliation, the sneer, and Mark's smirk. But instead of anger, he felt focus. Each setback had become a tool, each betrayal a lesson. He had learned the power of loyalty, the fragility of authority, and the strength of quiet strategy, and deep down, he knew that this was only the beginning. The silent countermove had started, and soon the ripple would turn into a wave that no one, not his mother, not his cousin, not anyone, could ignore. Daniel closed his laptop and looked out at the city lights. He smiled faintly, a smile not of victory yet, but of certainty. The storm was coming, and he would lead it. The city skyline gleamed under the afternoon sun as Daniel sat in a small rented office, overlooking the streets below. It wasn't the lavish space of his mother's company, but it didn't matter. The view was enough to remind him that success wasn't about fancy chairs or titles. It was about strategy, timing, and loyalty. In the past 2 weeks, Daniel had quietly assembled a team of trusted employees, clients, and suppliers who believed in him. They worked together seamlessly, moving with precision like a single machine. Every email he sent, every meeting he organized, strengthened his position. But he knew this was only the beginning. His mother, Linda, and cousin Mark were still in control of the old company, and the time to act carefully had arrived. He started the morning by reviewing the week's progress. Several key clients had already expressed interest in transferring their contracts to his new venture. Drivers and managers who had remained loyal were now actively sharing updates and insights. Daniel smiled faintly, knowing that each day made the old company more fragile without his leadership. Daniel had learned a valuable lesson in his mother's betrayal. Confrontation alone wouldn't work. Open attacks would provoke anger and close doors. No, he had to play the game differently. He would act subtly, strategically, and decisively. The goal wasn't just to regain power. It was to show, beyond doubt, that the company couldn't survive without him. He called a meeting with his key managers at the cafe where it had all started. "We don't need to rush or make noise," he said. "We need to move quietly but efficiently. Every client we contact, every driver we guide, every supplier we work with must feel our reliability. Let the old company fail on its own." The team nodded, understanding the unspoken rules. They had witnessed Daniel's competence firsthand. No one questioned him. No one doubted him. They only waited for instructions. By mid-morning, Daniel began contacting clients again, this time with carefully worded messages. No threats, no insults. Just reminders of the quality service, trust, and attention they had always received under his leadership. He emphasized continuity, reliability, and professionalism. Within hours, several clients scheduled meetings to discuss new contracts with Daniel's team. At the same time, he observed the old company's internal collapse. Linda tried to assert authority, issuing directives and demanding updates, but every system Daniel had designed was now in the hands of inexperienced personnel who barely understood them. Drivers followed old schedules, managers corrected each other in secret, and shipments started going missing or delayed. Every mistake was a reminder that the foundation of the company had been built by Daniel, not Linda. Mark, desperate to prove himself, tried to implement new ideas without understanding the workflow. "We need faster delivery," he barked during a staff meeting. "We need more efficiency." One of the senior managers, who still respected Daniel, quietly replied, "We are doing the best we can, but these changes are untested. Daniel always planned them carefully." Mark's face turned red with frustration, but he said nothing more. He realized he lacked the authority or knowledge to fix the problems. Meanwhile, Daniel had begun another subtle move, sowing curiosity and uncertainty among the old company's staff. He didn't contact them directly. He didn't reveal his plans. Instead, he allowed small hints of his progress to circulate. Employees who had joined him mentioned new opportunities. Clients inquired about contracts, and suppliers began asking questions about his company. Inside the old office, Linda noticed the shift. Emails from clients asking for updates, staff questioning her decisions, and deliveries going wrong. It all pointed to one uncomfortable truth. Daniel's absence was having consequences. She picked up the phone to call him again, her voice tinged with worry. "Daniel, we need you to come back." "Please, just come back for a meeting." Daniel didn't respond. He didn't have to. His strategy relied on silence, patience, and observation. By letting them struggle, he gained the upper hand without risking his own credibility. By afternoon, Daniel decided it was time to expand the silent campaign. He arranged a discreet meeting with a major supplier who had previously worked with his mother's company exclusively. He presented a detailed plan showing efficiency, reliability, and growth potential. The supplier, impressed with the strategy and organization, agreed to shift part of the supply chain to Daniel's company immediately. Back at the old company, Linda received the news in panic. "Why are our suppliers moving to him?" she demanded, pacing the office. "We are the company. We are the owners." Mark shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe they trust Daniel more than us." Linda's face turned pale. She had never imagined that loyalty could outweigh authority. She began realizing that Daniel wasn't just an employee, he was the heart of the business. Without him, everything was fragile. Daniel watched all of this unfold from a distance, silently. He didn't gloat or celebrate. Every misstep by Linda and Mark, every confused employee, every delayed shipment was proof of his strategy's success. He had created a situation where the old company was failing on its own, and he had done it without confrontation or drama. As evening approached, Daniel held another meeting with his team. "Tomorrow," he said, "we start reaching out to more clients. Not all at once. Slowly, carefully. We need to show consistency, reliability, and professionalism. Every success will increase trust and weaken their confidence." One of the managers nodded. "They'll realize they can't run the company without you." Daniel smiled faintly. "Exactly. But we don't push it. We let them see it themselves." Oh. The following morning, the first signs of real panic became visible inside the old office. Several clients, frustrated by delays and mistakes, had already contacted Daniel's new company. Employees were confused and frustrated by inconsistent orders from Linda and Mark. Drivers were refusing to take extra routes without clear guidance. Mark slammed his fist on the desk. "We can't function like this!" "Daniel, he's controlling everything from somewhere else." Linda shook her head, feeling a mix of fear and anger. "He's out of the company!" "He can't influence anything." But deep down she knew the truth. Every client moving to Daniel's company, every loyal employee quietly leaving, and every shipment gone wrong proved that he had influence no one else could match. Meanwhile, Daniel's team moved silently and efficiently. Contracts were signed, shipments were organized flawlessly, and clients received updates before they even asked. He didn't just provide services, he rebuilt trust. By midweek, whispers of Daniel's success began to reach the old office. Employees who had stayed were talking among themselves about better opportunities and more organized management. Drivers questioned orders. Managers expressed doubt. The once solid company began showing signs of collapse from the inside. Linda, desperate to regain control, called a meeting. "We need to fix this immediately," she exclaimed. "We need Daniel back." Mark nodded, looking frustrated. "But he won't come." "We need a solution." Linda realized that the power she thought she held was fragile. Authority alone wasn't enough. Without Daniel, the company had no foundation. Every system he built, every relationship he nurtured, every plan he implemented was gone, or more accurately, in Daniel's hands elsewhere. Daniel didn't interfere. He didn't need to. He watched as their panic grew. Every misstep, every delayed shipment, every angry client was part of the game. His silent strategy was working. By Friday, Daniel's influence had created an undeniable fact. The old company couldn't survive without him. Employees had begun quietly resigning. Clients were contacting him for guidance. Even suppliers were asking where he was and when they could work with him directly. And through it all, Daniel remained calm, collected, and strategic. He wasn't seeking revenge through confrontation. He was winning the game through intelligence, patience, and the quiet power of loyalty. That evening, Daniel sat alone in his office, reviewing the week's progress. The plan had worked perfectly. He had not only built a new company from scratch, but had also demonstrated quietly and powerfully that his influence was stronger than authority. He looked out at the city skyline once more, a small smile on his face. The next step, he thought, will be the hardest. But they will beg for me to come back, and when they do, it will be on my terms. Daniel leaned back in his chair, confident. The game of revenge had begun, and he was already winning. The storm was no longer coming. It was here, and he was leading it. The morning sun spilled across the city streets like golden fire, but inside Daniel's small office it felt calm, almost serene. He sat at his desk, sipping a cup of coffee, reviewing the week's events. Every email, every meeting, every quietly secured client had brought him closer to the moment he had been preparing for since the day his mother had pushed him out of his office. He didn't feel hatred anymore. Not really. That emotion had been replaced by patience, strategy, and a quiet satisfaction. Every misstep by Linda and Mark, every delayed shipment, every client lost to him had been carefully observed, calculated, and left to play out naturally. Now the old company was unstable, teetering on the edge, and Daniel was ready for the final strike. He called a meeting with his core team at the cafe where their silent revolution had begun. There were no dramatic gestures, no speeches of vengeance, just precision and focus. "Today," Daniel said, "we do two things. First, we secure the remaining clients. Second, we show Linda and Mark that the company cannot survive without true leadership. Not with force, not with authority. Only with competence and loyalty. Everything else is already failing." The team nodded. They had followed Daniel's plan without question for weeks. They trusted him completely, not because of fear, but because they had seen his vision and integrity firsthand. By mid-morning, Daniel and his team reached out to the last of the clients who had been hesitant to move their business. He presented detailed plans, smooth operations, and a promise of reliability. Within hours, several major contracts had already been signed. The momentum was undeniable. Meanwhile, inside the old office, panic was growing. Drivers were refusing extended routes without clear guidance. Managers were doubting decisions, whispering among themselves. Even the most loyal employees began to hesitate, confused by the lack of proper leadership. Linda tried to assert control, sending emails, making phone calls, and holding meetings. But every attempt failed. Daniel's systems, his methods, his careful planning, all of it was being missed by inexperienced hands. Clients began calling directly, bypassing Linda, asking for updates, guidance, and solutions that only Daniel could provide. Mark stormed into Linda's office, frustrated and exhausted. "This isn't working! We can't keep the company running!" "Daniel, he's taking everything we built." Linda's hands shook as she held her phone, glancing at emails and messages from angry clients. How is this possible?" she whispered. She realized finally that authority alone wasn't enough. Respect, competence, and trust could not be replaced by orders or family connections. Daniel, meanwhile, acted with calculated precision. He didn't call out Linda publicly. He didn't threaten Mark. Instead, he allowed the consequences of their own decisions to play out. Every delayed shipment, every frustrated client, every uncertain employee reinforced the truth. The company could not survive without him. By mid-afternoon, word of Daniel's success had spread. Employees and clients alike began to see him as the true leader. Even suppliers, who had been hesitant at first, reached out to offer their support, impressed by his organization and reliability. Then Daniel made his move. He arranged a discreet meeting with Linda and Mark at a neutral location, a small conference room in a rented building. No one else was invited. It was quiet, controlled, and deliberate. When they arrived, Daniel was waiting, calm and composed. He didn't glare, he didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at them with a steady gaze. "Daniel," Linda said, her voice trembling slightly, we need you to come back. Please. The company, it's falling apart without you." Daniel nodded slowly, his expression calm. "I see that. And I've been watching from a distance. I've seen the mistakes, the confusion, and the panic. I've seen that loyalty cannot be forced, that authority alone is not enough." Mark's face turned red, but he didn't speak. He knew there was no argument here. Daniel continued, "I've built something new, a company that respects trust, competence, and loyalty. It's growing every day, and clients and employees are choosing it because they believe in it. You tried to take control by force. You failed. But you don't need to take this personally. You only need to recognize it." Linda's eyes welled up. She had never seen her son like this, calm, confident, powerful, and entirely in control. The woman who had once dismissed him now realized the full extent of his capabilities. We didn't understand," she whispered. "We thought authority meant control. We thought family meant loyalty, but we were wrong. The company, it needs you, Daniel. We need you." Daniel leaned back slightly, still composed. "Yes, you need me. But I'm not here to return under the same circumstances. I'm here to make one thing clear. Respect and competence cannot be ignored. Authority alone is not enough. I will not step back into a situation where I am undervalued or dismissed. My work, my team, and my time are not negotiable. Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. We understand. We're sorry. We were wrong, Daniel paused. I believe that, but apologies alone cannot rebuild trust. Actions can. He looked at Mark. And you need to understand that loyalty cannot be forced. It is earned. You cannot take credit for work you did not do. Mark looked down, silent. For the first time, he understood that his smirk, his attempts to assert authority, and his impatience had accomplished nothing. He had underestimated Daniel completely. Daniel stood, signaling the conclusion of the meeting. I will consider returning, he said calmly, but only if it is under terms that respect my work, my team, and my vision. If not, I will continue to build, and the company will adjust to survive without me. Linda's hands trembled as she nodded. Yes, Daniel, we understand. Whatever you decide, we accept it. We want to do the right thing. He gave them a small nod, then turned and walked out. No dramatic gesture, no shouting, no confrontation. Just a calm, deliberate exit. Outside, the city seemed brighter. Daniel breathed deeply, feeling a sense of satisfaction. The game of revenge was complete, not through anger or destruction, but through patience, strategy, and quiet power. He had shown that loyalty and competence could not be ignored. Over the next few weeks, the old company began to stabilize, but under new terms. Employees who remained understood the importance of Daniel's methods, systems, and guidance. Linda and Mark learned a hard lesson. Authority without trust and competence is fragile. Daniel, meanwhile, focused on his new venture. It grew rapidly, fueled by clients, employees, and suppliers who respected him. His name became known as a leader who built loyalty, efficiency, and trust, not through force, but through skill, patience, and respect. One morning, Daniel received an email from Linda. It was short, simple, and sincere. Thank you for showing us the truth. We were wrong. I hope we can rebuild trust, not just as business partners, but as family. Mom. Daniel smiled faintly. He didn't rush to reply. Trust had to be earned, even with family. He looked out the window at the city, the streets bustling with life. His mind was calm, confident, and clear. The humiliation he had endured, the betrayal, the struggle, it had all led to this. He had turned a moment of disgrace into a foundation for respect, independence, and achievement. Daniel had learned that revenge wasn't about anger or destruction. It was about patience, intelligence, and quiet action. It was about showing the world and those who doubted him that he could rise above setbacks and create something stronger, better, and lasting. And as he looked out at the city, he knew this was only the beginning. Not of revenge, but of growth, leadership, and influence. He had taken control of his destiny, not through force, but through loyalty, skill, and the quiet power of competence. The storm had passed, and Daniel, the man who had been pushed out of his office, was finally in full command of his future.